All right, so the NCAA tournament just happened last March, and it's an exciting tournament because what it does is it takes 64, 68 of the best college schools for basketball in the nation and gives them the opportunity to become the best. And you do this by way of a tournament bracket. And I thought, what better way to crown a champion of the best neighborhood in all of Fort Collins for 2025 based off of some objective data-driven analysis. Now I'll talk to you a little bit about that here in a bit. So today, what we did is we looked at 10 different articles about top neighborhoods in Fort Collins, and we compiled them and we analyzed of what neighborhoods are consistently listed and came up with our top 16 neighborhoods. We'll start that right now. Number 1, downtown. 2, City Park, Huntington Hills, University Acres, Indian Hills, Bucking Horse, Southridge Greens, Miramont, Rigdon Farm, Parkwood, Warren Shores, Terry Point, Country Club Estates, Registry Ridge, Lexington Greens, and coming in at number 16, Oak Ridge Village. Now, these were just based off of mentions. And in future videos, if you have ideas about how I should weight things differently, score things, data that I might not have collected that should be included, I'm always all ears and excited to do this in the future. It did take a ton of work and a lot of data crunching, but hopefully at the end of this, we have a objective data based off of subjective scoring criteria that gives some information to you to make some decisions. Because my name is Patrick Soukup, and this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel, where you come to learn everything there is to know about Fort Collins and Northern Colorado: eating, sleeping, playing, best neighborhood, NCAA tournament style bracket style scoring criteria. Now, if you're considering relocating to the area, my team and I have helped hundreds of families move to the area. So give my team and I a call, text, or email, or even with 45% of you watching these on TV, scan the QR code and set up an appointment with us directly. Now, if you're considering buying, selling, or investing in Northern Colorado, my team and I are licensed agents in the state of Colorado and would love to be an asset on your team. But without any further delay, let's let the madness begin. So first, let's start off with the scoring criteria. What we looked at was appreciation, school rankings, walkability, and value. And really quickly to get into each one of those, we looked at appreciation, the home values on average between 2019 and 2020, comparatively to 2023 and 2024. So a 6-year appreciation. School rankings, we looked at great schools and we used those rankings right, wrong, or indifferently. It was an analysis that they've got behind what they're doing to give us rankings there. Walkability, bikeability, we added those two scores together and came up with a total walkability, bikeability score. And then finally, our best value is a price per square foot. Of the lower price per square foot, the more value you get. The more home you get for your dollar, the further your dollar is going to go for the size of house. Those are our 4 main scoring criteria. And then we looked at them. Initially, we weighted them all equally, but there was a certain section of the community that just very much outperformed the rest. So we thought, you know what? Hey, let's change up the weights just a little bit. And finally, we actually came to a conclusion where we weighted the value score the least, because ultimately value is also showing desirability. If somebody's willing to pay a higher price per square foot to be in a certain area, they're showing a desire to be in that neighborhood. But we kept those 4 criteria. We came up with the weighting metrics, and essentially 40% of the weight went to appreciation. 30% of the weight went to walkability and bikeability, because hey, people want to live in Fort Collins for lifestyle, community, outdoor focused, walking, biking everywhere, environmentally focused. So we gave that a 30%, followed by schools at 20% and value at 10%. So again, as I said before, if I need to change, or you think that there's other scoring criteria, or you think should be weighted differently, I'm all ears, would love to hear it. But at least now you know these are how we got to our champion. These are the scoring metrics we used. So let's go. Now, I will say, based off of our initial rankings, 1 through 16, there are some heavyweights that get absolutely demolished in the first round. Starting out with downtown versus Oak Ridge Village. Oak Ridge Village comes out swinging, takes down the number 1, the giant downtown Fort Collins. Miramont and Rigdon Farms, both kind of on the southeast side of town, strong powerhouse neighborhoods, lots of different things to desire about each one of those neighborhoods, but ultimately Miramont came out ahead. Indian Hills versus Terry Point, Terry Shores. Now, Indian Hills is kind of like a traditional Fort Collins neighborhood, 60s, 70s, ranch style, no HOA, comparatively to Terry Point, Terry Shores, where you've got one of the few lakes in northern Colorado, in Fort Collins area. You've got a little bit larger lots, very unique, custom-built homes. So a unique neighborhood, just about 5 to 7 minutes outside of downtown. But the winner ultimately was Indian Hills. University Acres versus Country Club Estates. Now, University Acres, again, a huge bikeability, walkability, decent sized houses, lots of ranches, good location. Comparatively, Country Club Estates, again, northeast Fort Collins, a little bit larger lots, cool houses, good value price per square foot. And the champion on this round is going to be Country Club Estates. A 6 versus 11 seed, Bucking Horse versus the neighborhood I grew up in, Warren Shores. Bucking Horse is a newer neighborhood, has Jessup Farms, good walkability, good bikeability, good location, newer homes, smaller lots, but very modern comparatively to Warren Shores, built in the 90s. You do have some unique style houses here, but great location, in my opinion, probably right about the middle of town. But the champion here, taking down my hometown neighborhood, is Bucking Horse. And what about my current neighborhood, Huntington Hills? I didn't even know how good of a neighborhood it was until I moved here and how many people want to live in the area. So got super lucky on this one. But we've got Huntington Hills, a 3 seed against Registry Ridge, a 14. Now Registry Ridge is actually in the Thompson Valley School District, south of Trilby on the southwest side of town. But it's an extremely desirable area. Lots of people wanting to move there, cool pools, parks, location, actually biking is great there. And again, you're on the southwest side of town, good sunsets, lot sizes, can't say enough. But Huntington Hills is a powerhouse for a lot of different reasons and takes down Registry Ridge. We got another side of town neighborhood, Southridge Greens, against, again, another traditional Parkwood neighborhood. And Parkwood, super desirable, lots of different price points. Now, it's interesting because there is Parkwood and Parkwood East, and there's different sections of Huntington Hills, but we gathered these together, right, wrong, or indifferent. But if the neighborhood was in Parkwood, whether that be Parkwood or Parkwood East, was considered all one. So this round went to the southeast neighborhood, Southridge Greens. And our final heavyweight going down is City Park at number 2 against Lexington Greens, number 15. And they get taken out. I will say, after looking at these, one of the things that did hurt specifically City Park and downtown was its value score. Even though it was weighted the least at 10% of the weight, they are still so much further ahead as far as expense, price per square foot, comparatively to any other neighborhoods. A lot of the neighborhoods were between $200 and $250 per square foot. And then you got to City Park and downtown, which was at $400 and about $425 respectively. So those were hurtful for the scoring. But regardless, we are on to round number 2. Let's go. We got 2 southeast side neighborhoods right here, Oak Ridge Village versus Miramont. Now, we've actually seen quite a few houses selling in Oak Ridge Village just over the last few months, above list price, extremely desirable. So it'll be interesting as we do these in future years, how the appreciation factor might change, value might change. But regardless, Miramont taking down Oak Ridge Village in round 2. Moving on to round 3. Indian Hills versus Country Club Estates. Now, both of these do have good sized lots, good sized houses, good location, but what won out here for Indian Hills was ultimately walkability and bikeability. Country Club Estates really struggles on that now, but in the future, Country Club Estates is actually gonna see a lot of trails being built there. The northeast side of Fort Collins is really getting a magnifying glass for our development for trails, bike lanes, and everything like that because of the growth of the area. So in the future, the bikeability, walkability score for Country Club Estates is probably gonna shoot up quite a bit. So moving on to the final 4, Indian Hills, the traditional OG Fort Collins neighborhood, going up against Miramont. In our bottom half of the bracket, Bucking Horse versus Huntington Hills. Now, the southeast side of Fort Collins, generally speaking, scored very well with schools. You've got Werner Elementary, Preston Middle School, and Fossil Ridge. Now, Fossil Ridge, is the only school that scores a 9 out of 10 comparatively to the other schools in the area. Both Rocky Mountain and Fort Collins score a 6 and Poudre scoring a 5. So if you're in that district, that does impact your school rankings. And so the southeast side did perform quite well because of the school rankings. And again, that's why we weighted it only 20% of the score, because we wanted to show appreciation, walkability, bikeability, that little stronger weight to give those scores. But ultimately, with such a strong school rankings, good bikeability, good appreciation as well, we do see southeast homes and neighborhoods perform quite well. So we've got here Bucking Horse versus Huntington Hills. And I will say Bucking Horse is a newer development, but a cool kind of 15-minute community vibe, probably a star in the eye of city council of how can we make cities walkable, bikeable, because you do have Rigdon Farms there. You got Bucking Horse, it's got King Soopers, all the grocery, Jessup Farms. It is a cool little part of Fort Collins. But ultimately, the southeast heavyweight, Huntington Hills, won out, going on to the Final Four. In our final contest, Southridge Greens versus Lexington Greens, and I felt like this again was a little bit of a heavyweight because some of these areas, bikeability, walkability, appreciation, Southridge Greens ultimately took down Lexington Greens, moving on into the Final Four against my neighborhood, Huntington Hills. So how did the Final Four end up? Let's go. All right, starting out with Miramont versus Indian Hills. Now, Indian Hills has so much going on for it, but one of the things that has happened in Miramont specifically is appreciation has been very strong in that neighborhood. And that being such a heavily weighted criteria is ultimately what won out and helped Miramont take down Indian Hills to move on into the championship. And on the lower half of the bracket, we've got Huntington Hills versus Southridge Greens. And the two things that really shone well for Huntington Hills versus Southridge Greens was its bikeability, walkability score, as well as appreciation. So between those two things, Huntington Hills takes down Southridge Greens to meet its foe to the north, Miramont. So we have got two neighborhoods very close together, which makes sense because the area is very desirable. It's got a high price per square foot, it's got a good appreciation, decent value, good walkability, bikeability. So these two end up finding each other in the championship game. But the champion to be crowned, which hurts my heart, is Miramont. Miramont comes out ahead. But let's look at some of the scoring criteria and who performed the best in different areas. Now, why did Miramont do so well? Well, it had 100% as far as appreciation and school scores go. So that pretty much just set it worlds above everybody else. Now, its walkability, bikeability score wasn't that great. And then finally, it actually has a really good value too. So you're actually getting a pretty decent sized house for the price point that you're buying in that neighborhood. Terry Point came in last. Essentially, they had the worst appreciation of all the neighborhoods, but still had 13.86% appreciation over the last 5 years. So, still not too bad. You buy a $600,000 house and it's appreciated over $60,000 over the last 6 years. Still not a bad deal, but just not the 60+% that we've seen on some of the other neighborhoods like Miramont. All of the southeast schools were essentially what came in at score of 23. They had Preston Middle School was our lowest rank at 6. Werner came in with an 8, and then if you're a Werner, it had a score of an 8, and those feed into Oak Ridge Village, Southridge Greens, Miramont, and Huntington Hills all feed into Werner. So they all had the same score of 23. So all of those scored the same 100 weight, with the worst scoring neighborhood, University Acres, at a 0. So, we essentially thought that with this weighted being 20%, schools are absolutely important. Resale value, we live in a community where there's a lot of families and things of that nature. So whether you have a family or you're considering reselling, that new buyer could potentially have a family and considering schools. So I think it's an important factor regardless if you have kids or not. Now, the walk-in bike score was pretty cool because most all had great bike scores. Not a ton had good walking scores. As you can guess, the best walking score, bike score, is going to be downtown and City Park. So that's where they weighted very strongly. And then On the value side, they didn't do well. So maybe in the future, we might have to adjust that a little bit, because when I had ChatGPT do this tournament breakdown, the final two in the championship were City Park and Downtown. Now, again, that was pretty subjective information, so we wanted to get a little bit more objective, but we can tweak this. And maybe I weighted things maybe how I shouldn't. Like, again, when I was done with this and I looked at the value score, well, somebody willing to pay $425 per square foot versus somebody paying $197 per square foot is probably showing that they're very interested in living in this area specifically. But some people, myself included, when I bought my house in 2013, I looked at my wife, Janae, and I said, hey, listen, if you find a house for under $100 per square foot, let's look at it. So I looked at value. I liked the idea of more bang for the buck in our time of life during then. And so I think you could look at value a few different ways, but for today's scoring criteria, it ultimately really impacted Downtown and City Park. And the best value buy in Fort Collins is Registry Ridge at about $197 per square foot on average over 2023 and 2024. We saw a ton of homes between $200 and $260 per square foot. So those scores really didn't impact too much. But when you jump from $260 to $400, it just was a huge drop for Downtown and City Park. So there you have it, folks, the NCAA tournament style bracket for the best neighborhood in all of Fort Collins. Miramont coming out with the crown, challenged Huntington Hills along with some other great neighborhoods throughout the tournament. If you have any questions or comments, or I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are of this video, leave them below. I appreciate you watching, and until next time, everybody, take care.